Guten Abend, and welcome to Northern France. Today, I'm going to be starting off my introduction to the Combat Mission series with the linking up and breaking out scenario from the Commonwealth expansion for Combat Mission Battle for Normandy. I'm a bit of a newbie to this, my only experience coming from playing the demo for the game before buying it, and secondhand from watching a variety of Combat Mission videos from different creators. So this will be quite the learning experience. First, though, a bit of background for why we are here. It is August of 1944, and it isn't going well for German forces in Normandy. With their inability to drive the Allied forces back into the sea since the D-Day landings in June, the Germans have been steadily beaten back, though such gains have been costly. Due to the environment that is Bocage country in northwestern France, many of the engagements were infantry-focused and bloody, which caused a slower pace than Allied command would have liked. However, with the success of Operation Cobra by Lieutenant General Omar Bradley's U.S. First Army, the jig was up. American forces broke out of Bocage country and captured the coastal town of Avranches. From there, Lieutenant General George S. Patton's fresh U.S. Third Army pushed south to Laval, sweeping aside the minimal German resistance in the Brittany region, as most of their forces are pinned in place fighting the U.S. First Army, Canadian First Army, and British Second Army to the northeast. While elements of the 20th Corps secure the few garrisoned towns along the Brittany coast, the main body pushed to secure the southern flank along the Loire River. Meanwhile, the 12th and 15th Corps have pushed southeast from Avranches and taken the evacuated German 7th Army HQ at Le Mans on August 9th. After that, the 15th Corps split to the north to form the southern side of what will come to be known as the Falaise Pocket. All of this within little over a week. On August 14th, Operation Tractable is launched by the Canadian First Army in the north, with the goal of taking the town of Falaise, along with the smaller yet no less important towns of Trun and Chambois along the Dives River. Although the initial plan was sound and a rapid breakthrough would have likely been achieved, an unfortunate Canadian officer got lost the night before and was killed in the dark by German sentries, with a copy of the operation's orders found on his body. Due to the shifting of German defenders considering the intel, Canadian forces were delayed reaching Falaise until August 16th, when they entered the city to light resistance. While Falaise wouldn't be fully cleared until the 18th, the Canadians began the push towards Trun and Chambois. That is where we find ourselves today. Chambois, or Framboise, as the scenario creator has called it for some reason. Maybe it's supposed to be fake Chambois smashed together, or something like that? I'm not sure. This scenario is listed as semi-historical, so units that should be somewhere else might be here instead, or the numbers could be adjusted. In fact, from what I've been able to find by doing some light research, so take it with a grain of salt, there was no Allied assault to take Chambois. Instead, to my understanding, the Allies just waltzed in and took the town uncontested. Regardless, we are playing as the Germans today, and our objective is to hold the city of Chambois and allow fleeing German forces to get from the arrival zone in the east to the exit zone in the west. What little intelligence we have available has spotted a U.S. infantry division approaching from Le Bourg-Saint-Léonard to the south, while the Canadian 2nd Corps is approaching from the north. On a meta level, and because I think the mission brief explicitly says this in the demo version of Combat Mission Battle for Normandy, this is the 359th Infantry Regiment from the 90th Infantry Division, the Tough Hombres, and elements of the Polish 1st Armored Division, who were a part of the Canadian 2nd Corps. While the Americans haven't been seen with Shermans, recon suggests that they might be supported by some light recon cars. Meanwhile, the Polish are living up to their unit's name, and a column of tanks and armored infantry have been sighted heading our way. To defend the town, well, I don't really have that much, and they are quite the ragtag bunch, comprising of Fusiliers and Luftwaffe Jaegers. For the Fusiliers, I have 1 Company HQ team, 1 Platoon HQ team, 2 4-man squads, and 1 5-man squad, backed up by 1 HMG section split into 2 teams, each carrying 1 HMG MG42 apiece. Alongside them, attached to the company headquarters, I have a 75mm IEL G18 light infantry gun, along with a 2-man ammo bearer team. Making up the other half of my force are my Luftwaffe Jaegers, with 1 Company HQ team, 1 Platoon HQ team, 3 4-man squads, 1 2-man Panzer Jaeger team with a Panzerschreck attached to the company HQ, and 2 2-man Panzerschreck teams attached to the platoon HQ. So, All in all, I'm in kind of a bad position. Most of my units are under strength, and I don't have that many of them, and while I do have at least one MG42 in each squad as a force multiplier, I don't have nearly enough infantry to cover all the approaches to town.
3 of my units, my Panzerschreck-wielding ones, must also be held in reserve to deal with the tanks coming from the north, identified as Cromwells by one of my objectives. On top of that, while most of my force are regulars or veterans, my G18 crew is green. Before I forget, I just want to do a quick side note with a little bit of background for both units. Fusiliers, as far as I can tell, is simply a ceremonial title intended to harken back to the days of the Imperial Army. They are, essentially, light infantry/recon units. History buffs might know that the German Luftwaffe did deploy ground troops, most famously the Fallschirmjäger. However, what some might not know is that the Luftwaffe did deploy other ground troops. These were called Luftwaffe Field Divisions, or LFDs. They were part of an effort to bolster the German Wehrmacht by transferring non-essential or excess personnel from other services. While they were called divisions, they were substantially smaller than a Wehrmacht division made up of light infantry, hence Jaeger, an artillery battalion, and support units. These units didn't have the best reputation for their performance, as, until late 1943, they were led by Luftwaffe officers who had little experience in leading ground troops. As such, training was poor for these units, and their performance reflected this.
To give a comparison, these units would be like if Colonel Klink from Hogan's Heroes was actually transferred to the Russian front and given command of a division. It isn't all hopeless. A platoon of Panzer Grenadiers along with some AFVs, or Armored Fighting Vehicles, will arrive in 5 to 10 minutes. They can help defend the town, but they still need to move on with the rest of the forces that arrive, which appear to be some type of tank, self-propelled gun, and a heavier tank of some sort at the end of the mission. On top of letting German forces pass through and keeping my casualties under 30%, I have 4 additional objectives. Destroying all Cromwell tanks nets me 200 points. Inflicting greater than 40% casualties on the enemy gives me another 200. Using less than 50% of my ammunition nets me another 100. And securing the terrain objectives gives me 700 points. Weirdly enough, the briefing says that there are 4 terrain objectives, but I only see 3. The Crossroads objective in the center of town, the Junkyard to the east, and the German exit. Terrain analysis. Our main objective, allowing German forces to retreat from Trun in the west to the exit point in the east, will occur along the road that is designated MSR Rubber. An initial examination of the terrain shows several key positions. The most obvious feature is, of course, the river that divides the map in half. The only means of crossing the river are the fords on the left flank, which I've designated C1, the bridge in the center, and the fords on the right flank, designated C2. Starting with C1, the right-hand ford is the easier of the 2 positions to cover. While the closest house to the ford is out of the question due to the amount of fire enemies will be able to pour onto that frontline position, the positions further up the hill are able to put fire straight onto the crossing and the landings on both sides of the river. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to project firepower onto the left-hand crossing. I'm mostly hoping that they either get bogged down on the southern landing or push the right-hand crossing. The bridge is a somewhat simpler, although decidedly more dangerous position. If there are any vehicles, this will be the most likely path where they will cross. With that in mind, I decided to move the light infantry gun, commanded by Obergefreiter Witt, to the end of the street near the town center, with a keyhole positioned down the entire length of the road. My reasoning for the move is to make better use of the gun's limited ammunition. While it only has 3 heat shells, it has 16 high explosive shells, which could be put to much better use against the less armored scout vehicles. Alongside this, I'm hoping the narrow cone of fire will allow me to get better use out of the crew's lower experience level. Supporting the gun is the near entirety of the Fusilier Company. Garrisoned in buildings with no southern-facing windows, 2nd and 3rd squads man the main road, covering the bridge approach. Unteroffizier Meissner's 3rd Squad are deployed the furthest down the road, watching the bridge end. Deployed alongside them, 4th Section B Team of the Attached Heavy Weapons Group, commanded by Obersoldat Lohn, watches out the building's western-facing windows to cover the right-hand crossing of C1. Behind them, in between 3rd Squad and the light infantry gun, are 2nd Squad, supporting 3rd Squad's position and hopefully deterring any U.S. infantry from rushing them and overwhelming their position. On the other side of the road, garrisoned on the second story of a two-story building, 1st Platoon's HQ team is doing the same as 2nd Squad. Behind them is Hauptmann Sufit, the Fusilier 1st Company commander, who is acting as a spotter for the southern approach along with his Company XO in the building designated as OP1. 2 buildings to the left of 1st Platoon HQ, 1st Squad is hiding on the bottom floor of a building that covers the buildings on the left side of the road, in case American infantry tries to bypass the main street by flanking through the buildings. While I'm mostly hoping for Witt's gun to do most of the heavy lifting, each squad has a single pixel troop equipped with a Kar-98K that has a Schießbecker grenade launcher attachment. It'll certainly deal with a Willys Jeep, although I'm unsure if it will penetrate a Greyhound's armor. It isn't particularly thick except for the shield around the 37mm main gun, so here's hoping. C2 is a much more troubling prospect. There are a lot of trees on both sides of the C2 crossings that protect any crossing from the few potential firing points. Not only that, but the northern landings are in a lowland leading up to the hill near the buildings at the junkyard. The only good points to set up would be at the junkyard buildings themselves or the barn and attached buildings on the southern side of the road. If the American infantry decide to push and garrison the exit point, I'd have no way to contest their advance or their seizure of the small trio of buildings there.
Finished with the southern approaches, let's turn our eyes north. The northern approach is extremely wide, lacking the choke points that the southern approach has. However, there are certain bits of terrain that does limit enemy movement. There are trace amounts of high bocage that cut off certain parts of the map from the advance of vehicles. Well, for the most part, that is. There are still openings in between a lot of these hedges, but it should take them some time to properly maneuver through, time that I can hopefully use to set up an ambush or merely react to their approach. With that in mind, I did the same thing I did to the south. I ignored the extreme eastern flank considering the tall bocage, and, as such, I focused my remaining forces on covering the northern entrance to the town, along with faintly covering the forest on either side of the road. Forming the core of this force is Unteroffizier Janssen, leading the Fusilier Battalion's 4th Section A team with their HMG MG42 in the building furthest back that still has a view of the entire stretch of road to the north. The building also has a southern-facing window which has a keyhole on the right-hand crossing at C1. To their front left, supporting them and watching the main road, is the 3rd Squad from the Luftwaffe Jaeger Battalion. In between those two units is the Jaeger Platoon's HQ team, who are just behind the main line of buildings flanking the road. To that group's front left, at the intersection, is the platoon's 1st Panzerschreck team, led by Flieger Hatze, who is wielding the Panzerschreck. To their left is 2nd Squad, led by Unteroffizier Taus, who are holding the extreme western edge of the northern flank, watching the forest directly in front of their building and preventing enemies from trying to bypass the main road. Just across the road from 3rd Squad is 1st Squad, who are doing the same thing 2nd Squad is, this time just on the right side of the road. To their right, between 3rd Squad's building and the old Norman Keep, is the platoon's 2nd Panzerschreck team, who are currently hiding on the lower floor. In the Keep, designated as OP2, is the Jaeger Company's HQ team, commanded by Hauptmann Bertram, who are on short target arcs and are acting as spotters for the northern road. Just in front of them is the company's Panzerjäger team, led by Unteroffizier Dietsch. Here is an image of the final deployment, along with most avenues of fire. With all of that set up out of the way, it is time to hit start and begin the battle. The first 2 turns are quiet, as our forces get ready for the fight ahead. 3 minutes in, however, both Hauptmann Bertram and Sufert spot enemy forces on their respective sides. To the south, Sufert manages to make an amazing spot through a copse of trees, spotting 3 separate groups of American GIs. One of which looks to be an officer, and presumably his XO. In the north, Hauptmann Bertram spots a Piat-wielding Polish soldier to the left of the northern road. Before long, he spots faint infantry movement on both sides of the road. The Polish are definitely wasting no time. This is quickly followed up by some type of light mechanized contact, with one of the contacts driving into the forest in front of OP2.
Before the turn ends, Deitch's team manages to spot the contact through the trees and identify it as an M3 half-track. Interestingly enough, it seems to be filled with some type of command unit. Swiftly following them, Polish infantry are spotted through a keyhole by 3rd Squad, although the shots are ineffective. 1st Squad, who has spotted the enemy through another keyhole, has unfortunately similar results. While that is happening, another mechanized contact is pushed into the forest to the left of the road before stopping in the middle. Moving Hatsa and his assistant to the building across the road on the next turn, they get eyes on the contact, another M3 half-track with a command unit loaded. Taking a shot, the Panzerschreck team scores a hit to the lower right hull, destroying the Vic and everyone inside. First blood to us. Meanwhile, the first of our temporary reinforcements have arrived in two 251 half-tracks armed with MG42s, along with a 251/10 support half-track armed with a 37mm PaK 36. These are SS Panzer Grenadiers, 3rd Battalion, 11th Company, 1st Platoon, of whatever unit they're supposed to be based off of, to be precise. Looking at their platoon commander, it lists that there is supposed to be a 4th half-track in this group. Combined with the fact that the briefing said that they would show up within 5 to 10 minutes, I'm guessing that there will be a second group of units at the 10-minute mark. All told, this brings an additional 8 MG42s to the battle, which is a not unsubstantial number. They've arrived just in time, too, as Polish infantry have been seen flanking through the northwest bocage. While the Panzer Grenadiers are moving into position, the Polish infantry following the half-tracks have moved closer, and firefights are beginning to pick up between them and my Luftwaffe Jaegers. What seems like an entire section has darted out of the houses it was using for cover along the road and tries to move into the relative cover of the forest. However, their dash brings them into the line of sight of the Jaegers' 1st Squad, who manages to kill the Polish pixel troop in leading the charge. On the main street, another unit of Polish infantry appeared to be trying to do the same thing, but decided to cross in front of the building instead of through it. They receive a hail of MG42 fire from Janssen's team and the Jaeger's 3rd Squad for their trouble, before deciding to book it. A Polish officer tries to rally his men to push down the main street, but receives the same fate. His death ends the assault down the center for the moment, as his second-in-command and radio man pull back. During this, the M3 in the eastern forest is spotted dashing across the road into the western one. Unfortunately for me, I pulled Hatz's team back to their original position after destroying the other M3, and they don't have line of sight on the second one when it stops. Luckily for me, the sporadic gunfire from Taus's building seems to make the crew panic, and they reverse away instead of tearing into the 4-man team with their 50 caliber HMG. By the end of that turn, all 3 Panzer Grenadier 251s have reached their positions and unloaded the pixel troop and riding along with them. Panzer Grenadier's 2nd Squad is moving to a 2-story building just southwest of Taus's. Meanwhile, 1st Squad, led by Unterscharführer Freiburg, and 3rd Squad, led by Unterscharführer von Steuben, have also dismounted and split towards their designated buildings. Freiburg's squad occupy the barn house to the left of the 251, which has a good view of the stretch of forest that the Polish infantry are most likely to move through. Von Steuben's squad has moved to the right of the 251, taking a position in a two-story building between 1st and 2nd, forming an extension for the northern left flank that the Polish infantry will hopefully break on. Lastly, the platoon commander and his support 251 has taken up a keyhole position covering the right-hand crossing at C1. On the next turn, another stroke of luck gives Janssen's MG42 crew the chance to damage the M3 that panicked when it backed all the way up onto the main street and parks itself there. I'll just let this play out in full so you can see how goofy what happens next is.
Biegnij! Sanitariusz! Uwaga, druk! Dostałem! Ratuj się, uciekaj!
Before long, Freeberg spots a unit of Polish infantry coming through an opening in the bocage and opens fire. Not long after, the rest of his squad follows suit. In the south, the Fusiliers' first squad have spotted an M2 mounted Willys Jeep on the other side of the river, seemingly scouting for any return fire. Not seeing any, the Jeep eventually backs off, and first squad loses sight of it. However, that's not the only alarming movement to the south. Lawon has spotted a massive movement of American infantry to the southwest crossing a field, who seem to be heading for C1. And when I say massive, I mean massive. It looks like an entire platoon is crossing the field. Back on the northern side, the Luftwaffe Jaeger's first squad don't have enough firepower to maintain supremacy over the Polish units in the eastern forest and move to the bottom floor of their building. Seeing the lack of contact on the main road, third squad is ordered to cross the street and support first. This nearly causes casualties, as the Polish command squad that fled earlier take this moment to try advancing down the main road again. Luckily, A-Team once again comes to the rescue with their MG42 and cuts down the radio, just before 3rd Squad crosses the road and takes up position in the 2nd-story building that has line of sight on the eastern forest.
Feindliche Infanterie gesichtet.
Next turn, 1st Squad retakes their initial position and a firefight erupts. Interestingly, despite only having taken 2 losses, the Polish section books it and retreats. At the 10-minute mark, another group of reinforcements arrive. This time, it is the Panzer Grenadiers' 1st half-track, an understrength SS Panzer Pioneer platoon from 4th Battalion, 10th Company, and a Panzer IIL from 3rd Battalion, 7th Company.
The escape from Trun must have been hectic for the Panzer Grenadiers to lend their spare 251 to get the Panzer Pioneers out. Even then, the Panzer Pioneers had to split their second squad into two-man teams and put one of them in the Kubelwagen with their platoon leader, Obersturmführer Schweikmann. I won't turn down the extra firepower, especially not the Panzer II, which is quickly brought up to act as a blocking force to keep American infantry that are approaching C1 from garrisoning the two-story building at the edge of the woods. At the Barnhouse, the firefight is intensified as the entire Polish section has moved close enough to start returning fire at Freiburg's squad. Despite the hail of machine gun fire pinning down most of the section, a Polish rifleman manages to snap off a shot that catches one of the machine gunners on the shoulder, causing the first casualty among the German forces. Despite that, the combined firepower of von Steuben, Freiburg, and 2nd Half-Track, who had finally managed to finagle into spotting the Polish, quickly locked down the section and begin inflicting casualties. 3rd Half-Track, having been turned around to face C1, somehow manages to spot American infantry through the trees and opens up with several bursts of MG-42 fire. The gunner is quickly joined by both HMG teams, turning the engagement into a V-shape, not quite an L yet. The Americans' poor spacing quickly turns their approach into a bit of a funnel, and casualties mount. At the bridge, Meissner's 3rd Squad spots enemy infantry entering a building on the other side of the river. Before Meissner can signal to his platoon commander down the street, however, an M8 Greyhound rumbles into view. Engaging the armored scout car, the squad's machine gunner puts a burst into the exposed commander, and the grenadier puts a round through the upper front hull of the vehicle. He doesn't do any further damage, but the crew are spooked as they fire and miss a shot at the LEL G18 crew. Unfortunately, the gun's crew also miss high with their return shot, and the M8 pops smoke and tries to reverse away. Luckily, Meissner's grenadier manages to fire another round, this time penetrating through the M2 railing mount on the top of the vehicle and detonating inside the scout car. While that is happening, Schweikmann's Panzer Pioneers have been shuttled to the right flank to take positions defending the junkyard objective, and to keep an eye on C2. Not long after they arrive, they spot Polish infantry approaching from the forest to the north. Back at the bridge, an issue has cropped up. The smoke of the M8 pop is now obscuring our view of the bridgehead, and my units can hear other vehicles moving about in the smoke. Not long after, another Greyhound charges out of the smoke and stops right in front of Meissner's building. While the surprised squad does manage to kill the commander with another burst of MG-42 fire, the vengeful crew cut the machine gunner in half with their 30 caliber coaxial MG, killing him instantly. Thankfully, Witt nails the vehicle in the upper front hull on the right side, leaving only the gunner and loader as survivors to bail from their wrecked vehicle and flee into the smoke. They run through the smoke, pass through the buildings on the left side of the road, and are engaged by the Fusiliers' 1st Squad. To cap off the main road assault for that turn, a Willys Jeep is annihilated by 2nd Squad a few moments before the M8 crew. At C1 on the next turn, the Americans are having a very bad time. An entire squad is pinned down by Janssen's HMG team and 3rd Half-Track. before slowly whittling them away with MG42 fire.
Medic!
However, the same cannot be said for the northwestern flank, as a Polish rifleman kills the gunner of second half-track. Even though their main assault has been broken for the most part, scattered Polish infantry continue to try and probe the northwestern flank, and I'm starting to get a little sick of it. Therefore, I order 2nd Squad forward to gain eyes on the forest. In all honesty, they've been a little bit useless in the building they were previously occupying. This move is something I should have done a few turns ago.
Schneller, Männer, schneller!
As the Panzer Grenadiers' 2nd Squad moves forward, Freeburg's men continue to fire on the Polish section at the western forest edge, just as an officer attempts to rally them. Soon, the officer is spotted following them as they retreat, and things die down in the northwest for the moment. At the junkyard, more Polish infantry are advancing from the northern woods, and I'm starting to get worried that the Panzer Pioneers' 2nd Squad's A-team, led by Unterscharführer Frick, won't be enough to cover the northeastern flank. They're only a 3-man team after all. Therefore, I bring Unterscharführer Thulen's 1st Squad to hold the right-hand building of the junkyard complex, leaving only a 2-man scout team from 1st Squad to keep an eye on C2. Just as I think things are beginning to stabilize, sound contacts from the north bring my greatest fear: tanks. On the next turn, I pull the Panzer Grenadiers' 2nd Squad back, a bit of a wasted movement there, and detach a 2-man team to the now gunnerless second half-track to retrieve the Panzerfaust 30K from the vehicle. I've also pulled my Panzerjäger team back from their 3-story building on the forest edge. They were too exposed there anyways, and I already have my other 2 Panzerschreck teams who can maneuver to cover the area the Panzerjäger team was supposed to. As that is happening, a tank contact is blazing its way through the northwestern forest. It's getting to a halt just short of Taus's building. Even worse, the Cromwell's commander manages to duck into the vehicle and close the hatch despite several bursts of MG42 fire. Luckily, the Cromwell is stopped right in front of Potsdam, who has reoccupied the ambush building after the debacle at the second M3 half-tracker. He licks his lips, lines up a shot, and sends an 88mm heat rocket straight through the upper left hull from less than 50 meters away. Despite that, nearly the entire crew manages to bail on the next turn, although Taus's squad quickly remedies that. Meanwhile, the Polish infantry assaulting the junkyard are having about as much success as the ones who assaulted the barn house. While some make it into the central set of buildings, Thulen's squad can put fire on them from their right-hand flanking position, as Frick's 3-man A-team shred the remaining infantry, attempting to reach the relative safety of the middle buildings. In fact, an entire section breaks from the cover of the central buildings and flees, which I believe says a lot about their morale currently. In the meantime, I've brought the Panzer Grenadiers' first half-track back from the extreme right flank I sent it to. I was trying to see if it could cover at least one of the C2 crossings, but gave up and pulled the vehicle back down the road to try to get a flanking shot on the enemies in the forest. At the bridge, the smoke has begun to clear, allowing Meissner to spot the jeep attempting to cross. Despite both Meissner and his grenadier putting fire into it and killing the driver and passenger, the gunner manages to cut down the grenadier before reversing away. It is time to go. In preparation for this, I chose buildings that had a back door to escape from, and both Meissner and Lawn's groups get out of there. Although they do take some sporadic fire from across the river, both groups manage to successfully retreat to friendly positions. Just as the two groups are fleeing out the back door, another Greyhound rolls past the recently evacuated building. Immediately, it is engaged by the Fusilier 1st Platoon HQ and 2nd Squad, who launch another 30mm HE round into the upper front hull of the vehicle, which seems to daze the crew. This proves to be a fatal mistake as Vit lines up the G18 on the stationary M8 and puts a round straight through the center of the vehicle, scrapping it. Before I can celebrate, another tank contact is moving down the left-hand side of the northwestern forest. With no eyes on it, I pull the majority of my Panzer Grenadiers out of their buildings and hide them on the southern side. The only exceptions are a detached AT team from von Steuben's squad and the team retrieving the Panzerfaust 30K from the 251. That isn't to say that the repositioned squads are completely ineffective now, as von Steuben proves when his A-team begins to pour fire on the American infantry at C1 moving through the trees.
Attack! Give it to him! I'm hit! Medic! I'm hit!
Second squad joins in by gunning down an American officer that was attempting to hide behind a tree with his binoculars. The Panzer Grenadiers platoon HQ even gets in on the action with his support 251, firing his 37mm gun at a clump of infantry hiding behind a set of trees closer to the crossing. Near the keep, the 2nd Panzerschreck team has come out of hiding at the sounds of a tank and spotted another Cromwell. The gunner takes a shot at it, and it's a miss. Now, the Cromwell crew obviously aren't happy about being shot at and quickly pinpoint the team's position before briefly pinning them with coaxial fire. After recovering on the next turn, the team takes another shot at the tank, to the exact same results. This time, Flieger German, and yes, that is his actual last name, doesn't get away so lucky and eats an HE shell to the face. Checking back with the other tank contact in the northwest reveals another unwelcome surprise in the form of a second tank rolling to the edge of the forest. Fortunately, it stops a near-perfect view of Patza, so I moved from his original building to try to get eyes on the potential approach of the other tank contact if it had continued to move forward. Patza once more proves how much he deserves a promotion and lands a shot into one of the wheels, penetrating through it and entering the lower left hull. Still, the crew hide inside of their disabled tank for about half a turn before deciding to bail. Turning in a panic to find the source of the explosion, von Steuben has enough time to sigh in relief at the disabled tank before realizing the crew are bailing, and redirects his machine gunner to deal with them. Most of the remaining turn is a turkey shoot, as a section of Polish infantry pushes down the northern road and takes losses. The jeep that killed Meissner's grenadier is scrapped. American infantry pushing the southern main road are pinned down and picked apart before being forced to dive into buildings. One squad garrisoned the second story of the building across from the Fusilier first squad, taking a couple of casualties as a result before first squad pulls back. Zed's squad nearly gives me a coronary by splitting and going out of both entrances for some reason, but they all make it back intact. Unfortunately, that cannot be said to the Jaeger's third squad. Another Polish section is trying to push down the main road to follow up the partial success of the previous section. While the push seems sluggish and uncoordinated, section's Bren gunner and assistant move onto the street and, under fire, set up the Bren, get adjusted, and put accurate fire through the window that third squad is firing from. A few rounds manage to catch DatCameraMON, the squad's 2IC, in the leg, and he goes down in a heap. Seeing his second-in-command drop to the floor, Unteroffizier Probst follows, before crawling over to check on him. Probst reaches him in time to see the blood rapidly drain from Mon's face, and Mon gives a single, rattling breath before stilling, his eyes blankly staring at the roof beyond Probst. The push is rebuffed, but at the cost of another casualty. Although Probst wouldn't know it, House's squad would make up for Mon's death, as his squad caught the first Polish section and pushed up in the open as they moved from the building that they were occupying. Before the turn ends, the Panzergrenadier's 2nd Squad's B team, the one sent to retrieve the Panzerfaust 30K from the half-track, reoccupies 3rd's old building and spot the remaining Cromwell on the left flank. Thankfully, our heavy support has finally arrived. A Jagdpanzer IV and a Wesp SPG have arrived from 3rd Battalion, 7th Company, the same unit as the Panzer IIL that arrived earlier. Now, the Wesp wouldn't be very useful against the Cromwells without some setup, and the open top makes it dangerous to put it within rifle grenade range of infantry without support. The Jagdpanzer, though, that I have a use for. While things are mostly moving into position from my side on turn 21, the Americans are also continuing to maneuver. At the Panzer Pioneer Scouts barn, I've forgotten to put the scouts in a short target arc, and the 2-man squad becomes a 1-man squad before I'm able to pull the scouts back. Thankfully, the remaining scout is the one carrying the demo charges, which I plan to use in just a moment. Hotz's team have taken up position in the building that the Jaeger's 3rd Squad set up in to support first, and has drawn eyes on the tank that killed Fliege Germany. It is no match for Hotze, and quickly begins to burn. While the Cromwell's crew flee into the woods, my Jagdpanzer has been brought up to try and get eyes on the Polish tank sitting on the edge of the northwestern woods. They don't manage to spot the thing despite it being around 100 meters in front of them, but that doesn't matter. Because, on the next turn, the Cromwell decides to charge forward. Just before it passes out of line of sight, one of the pixel troopers from von Steuben's detached AT team snaps off a shot that kills the exposed tank commander. The tank then grinds to a halt on the eastern side of the house, staring 2nd half-track and the remaining infantry of von Steuben's 3rd Squad in the face. Neither have any AT weapons to face the metal beast. If the Cromwell decides to open fire, the entirety of my left flank may collapse before I'm able to deal with the threat. Hotz's field of view is blocked by another building between himself and the Polish tank on the east side. On the west side, the Jagdpanzer's line of sight is blocked by the building that the Cromwell is hiding behind, along with the friendly forces in the way. Downslope to the southeast, the Panzer IIL has its back exposed to the tank, and 3rd half-track is also exposed. My only hope would be for either Hotze, the Jagdpanzer, or 3rd Squad's detached team with their Panzerfaust 30K to deal with the armored vehicle before it wreaked too much havoc among my line. For several moments, the Cromwell stays still, staring down 3rd Squad. Then, the Cromwell pops smoke and backs away. Breathing a sigh of relief, I watch as my Jagdpanzer struggles to spot the Cromwell for a bit before finally noticing the cruiser tank and putting a giant hole on the right side of the turret. Coincidentally, the detached team from 3rd Squad also hits dead center of the tank's frontal hull with their disposable at the same time. Then, the Jagdpanzer decides to go back for another round. And one last shell for good measure. Despite 3 75mm shells penetrating the top, middle, and bottom of the tank's right side, and a Panzerfaust 30K hitting dead center on the frontal armor, a single crew member manages to survive the onslaught. Meanwhile, Lahn's team had been pulled away from the bridge approach and ordered to move east, to reinforce Schweikmann's Panzer Pioneers at the junkyard from the American forces pushing from C2. In preparation for the American push, I order the survivor of the 2-man scout team to set his demolition charge on a wall that was blocking access to a courtyard on the south side of MSR Rubber. That way, I can move my support 251 into the courtyard and gain a keyhole on the Americans' axis of advance. While I'm scrambling to divert units to the east, the Americans have already begun pushing up from the lowland crossings at C2, and Schweikmann opens up with his MP40.
I'm hit!
At the same time, first half-track catches sight of a Polish officer and company entering a small farmstead on the edge of the eastern woods, past the junkyard. As more American infantry arrive from C2, I realize I'm going to have to take a gamble that there isn't any more Polish infantry available to attack the junkyard objective from the north, and rotate Thulin's squad to cover the ridge to the south. Not a moment too soon either, as American infantry crest the top of the ridge just as first squad turns around. Realizing the danger of first half-track's position, with infantry occupying the forest/ridge to their left, and an unknown amount of infantry in the farmstead to their right, I pull them north, and try to keep both sets of infantry firmly in front of the vehicle instead of to either side. Having kept Frick's squad facing north for any Polish stragglers, they managed to spot a 3-man team who come out from behind one of the barns and try to exploit the lack of gunfire in their direction. They do not last long. Following them, the last Cromwell tries to assault 3rd Squad position, only to be stopped by a rocket from Unteroffizier Deitch. Despite a penetration in the upper front hull of their tank crew remains stationary until next turn, when Deitch's assistant puts a round through the exposed commander's forehead. The remaining crew then bails. With resistance on the western flank almost non-existent, besides pinned down units of American infantry tucked into the northern banks of the Seymour crossing, I brought my Jagdpanzer to the crossroads in the center of town. I'd spotted American infantry moving into the buildings on both sides of the road earlier and feared that they were regrouping for a push inside, and I decided to have the tank commander pop his head out of the hatch and see if that would allow me to gain the necessary line of sight. Before I could order the Jagdpanzer to fire, however, automatic fire coming from the building I was aiming at nearly takes the commander's head off, and he buttons back up, pops smoke, and retreats. At the junkyard, American infantry are closing in on the objective with reckless abandon. Frick's second-in-command is leading B team to occupy the building to the left of Schweikmann's when an American GI rounds the corner while the team is still in the middle of the street. Caught by surprise, both men fumble for a moment before the German pixel troopman is slain. The remaining members of 2nd Squad also fumble and retaliate in an incredibly awkward firefight before extracting revenge.
Schweikmann himself is holding the first row of buildings with his MP40, preventing the Americans from gaining a foothold. Even Deitch is getting in on the action, firing a rocket just in front of the American-occupied building at the edge of the ridge. Finally, Lawn's HMG team have arrived and are moving to set up in a 2-story building next to the courtyard wall that the scout blew up. Technically behind enemy lines, first half-track spots and kills 2 Polish pixel troopmen at the farm. One of them being a radio man. Next turn, he duels with an American sniper in the woods. Before shredding the GI. Not one to be left out, the support half-track manages to spot a command unit on the southern slopes and scores a double kill with their 37mm gun, killing what looks to be both the commander and his second-in-command while the radio man books it. On top of the ridge, American GIs continue to charge forth with wild abandon, taking enormous casualties in the process. Another American officer attempts to reach Schweikmann's position, but is cut down by his German counterpart. His men bravely attempt to follow his heroic charge, but are also cut down. Despite the initial success of the defense, the Americans are coming dangerously close to my position, and I'm starting to get nervous. I even bring the Kubelwagen driver forward to bring his rifle to bear. Alongside that, the Americans are starting to get enough bodies to concentrate their firepower, and it isn't long before they pin down both Deitch's team and Thulin's squad. I give the order to pull back to see if the Americans will take the opportunity to try across the road, but not before Deitch's assistant is hit. Another German casualty. Although not without some measure of revenge, as on the next turn Deitch aims his Luger and makes a 45-meter headshot on a reloading American pixel trooper. After that, the assault on the eastern flank is finished, helped by the arrival of my Vesp, along with the Panzer Grenadiers from the west flank, who have shuttled into their half-tracks and rushed over with their side mostly clear. One last interesting note of resistance is coming from the buildings near the bridge. As Lon's team set up to engage the American assault on the junkyard, their position is technically visible from the bridge buildings. Consequently, they've had sporadic potshots taken at them for some time, and I was able to pinpoint the building directly across from the Fusilier 1st Squad's original building and the 3rd Squad's original building as the points of fire. Getting a little sick of small groups of stragglers, I decided to sick 2nd and 3rd Squads in the two buildings. 2nd Squad leaves out the back door of their building and advances along the same path Lon and Meissner's group used to retreat from their original position. Coming up from behind, the two-man command unit is wiped out in an instant. Third Squad deploys in the 2nd story of a building along MSR Rubber and lays into the other GIs. After that, the battle is essentially over. Neither the Poles nor the Americans make any significant pushes after they failed assault on the junkyard. Small elements continue to probe my remaining forces, but they are almost universally blown away. Feeling petty, I order the Vesp to obliterate the house the Americans were using as a base of fire to attack the junkyard. Somehow, building eats 305mm HE shells before one of the walls finally gives out. The Jagdpanzer that was brought up following the Panzer Grenadiers puts an end to the Polish forces at the farm north of MSR Rubber. From there, I begin moving my forces off map. The only interesting things that happened was that the Wesp decided to put a heat shell into the side of the abandoned Cromwell, to no visible effect. There was almost an incident with scattered Americans trying to do one last hurrah against the junkyard objective while the Panzer Pioneers were loading into their half-tracks. Thankfully, they failed, and the rest of my forces exit the map before I call for a ceasefire with 13 minutes left on the clock. It is a German army total victory. However, looking at the details of how many men are left on the field, I was shocked at the number of enemy pixel troopers still remaining. The Allied forces had 91 men okay, 110 killed, and 74 wounded, with 3 men having been captured by the Wesp, somehow. Along with that, they've lost 5 Cromwell tanks, 4 armored vehicles consisting of all the Greyhounds and one of the 2 M3 half-tracks while the other is immobilized. To cap it off, 3 Jeeps were also lost. On my side, I have 99 men okay, 4 killed, and 6 wounded. The 4 dead being the 2 members of Meissner's 3rd Squad, DatCameraMON, and the gunner of the Panzer Grenadiers' 2nd half-track. For the 6 wounded in action, they are the Panzer Pioneer Scout, Frick's Panzer Pioneer 2nd in command, one of the Panzer Grenadiers in Freiburg Squad, Deitch's assistant, and Flieger German, surprisingly, and a member of Taus's squad who was shot in the last minutes of the battle by a lone Polish Chad who was still fighting despite his entire section being wiped out, armed with a now empty Piat and a Brun. gain 301 points. Majority of those points are from making it over the Dives River Bridge and preserving the old Norman keep. The only other single remaining point is for killing one of the Panzer Grenadiers. For me, I've secured 1,248 points. I've held all my ground objectives. Despite destroying every Cromwell tank, I didn't receive full points, which I presume is because the crew are also counted into that tally. That is kind of meh to me, but I suppose the experience and training of a crewman is still important, not just the machine. On top of those two, I fulfilled all of my other parameter objectives as well. Oh, before I forget, there was also a Tiger tank that showed up at the 30-minute mark, which is supposed to be my heavy armored support, but I never used the thing because it showed up so late. So, there. Little note. I'm going to go into a more detailed breakdown of the casualties. If you do not want to watch that, there is one more chapter that I would like you to watch before you click off this video. To further break down the casualty list of the Allied forces, of the 154 Americans involved from both the 359th Infantry Regiment and the 90th Cavalry Reconnaissance Troop, only 65 survived the battle. 56 of those were members of the 359th Infantry Regiment, 1st Battalion A Company, who had been reduced by over half of their original number, 125 men. The hardest hit were 3rd and 4th Platoon, who just wouldn't stop trying to push for the junkyard objective. Granted, 4th Platoon was the company's weapons platoon, but still, of the 32 and 26 men the two platoons brought to the battle, only 5 and 13 survived respectively. Even then, only one of the 13 remaining members of 4th Platoon, 4th Platoon's radio man, directly took part in the assault. All the rest were the mortar teams that were held back and did nothing for the entire battle. None of the remaining members in 3rd Platoon are higher than the rank of private. At C1, casualties were a little less brutal, but only just. 2nd Platoon is down to just 15 men from their original 31. They are in a better position leadership-wise, with their HQ team and one sergeant still alive, commanding 1st Squad. 2nd Squad is completely leaderless, while 3rd Squad still has a corporal. Regardless, all of them are in a terrible state morale-wise. Alongside them was an attached Pioneer platoon consisting of 8 men, broken into a 2-man HQ team and a 6-man Pioneer team, who were all killed. They were the group that was pinned down closest to the right-hand C1 crossing. 1st Platoon, the group that pushed across the bridge, came out of the battle with the fewest casualties by comparison, losing only 10 men. The platoon is now being led by the platoon sergeant after the HQ team was cut to shreds trying to enter a building on the north side of the road past the bridge. 1st and 2nd Squad both lost only 1 man each. The rest of the casualties were found in 3rd Squad, who were cut to shreds engaging the Fusiliers 1st and 3rd Squads, losing 6 of the 7 men in the squad. The sole survivor, the squad marksman, will likely suffer from battle fatigue. As the cherry on top, the captain leading A Company was killed in the last few minutes by the Fusiliers' 2nd Squad. They were the group that was snuck up on from behind. While those casualties are quite devastating, with the Americans only having about 42% of their combat strength left after the battle, they don't compare to the Poles' casualties. Of the 114 men from the 1st Polish Armored Division that participated in the battle, only 26 remain. 10th Armored Cavalry Brigade, 10th Dragoons Regiment, B Company came into the battle with 89 men and ended the battle with 17. The near entirety of the company's leadership is gone, both the company commander and his second-in-command being killed in the M2 half-tracks. The highest-ranking member of the entire force is a Porucznik, a lieutenant of the 4th Platoon, who has only himself, his 2 command squad members, and a single member of the platoon's light mortar detachment left. 3rd and 5th fared little better. 3rd Platoon has 8 men remaining, with the breakdown being 1 member of 1st Section, 3 members of 2nd Section, and 4 members of 3rd Section. The highest-ranked member is the leader of 3rd Section, a Platonowy, or platoon man, which is the equivalent of a corporal or Unteroffizier. 5th Platoon is in a similar state, with only 1st and 3rd Sections having 3 and 2 men left respectively, and, again, led by the 1st Section's Platonowy. The 10th Polish Mounted Rifles Regiment, 1st Squadron that deployed their Cromwells in support of the Dragoons, started the battle with 25 men, with 5 men each crewing a Cromwell. At the end, every tank was destroyed with only 9 tank crewmen remaining. None of the 5 tank commanders survived. The 1st Troop HQ only has 2 men remaining at the end, while 1st Troop 1st Crew was completely wiped out, and 2nd Crew, the crew of the last tank to be knocked out, only lost their tank commander. 2nd Troop is even worse, with only 1 crewman left, panicking in the Polish's back line. 2nd Troop's first crew only has 2 crewmen remaining. Now, while these losses sound devastating, and they really are, let's not mistake that, it is important to step back and look at how the remaining forces are positioned. While practically every enemy unit on the field is in a fragile morale state, the only exceptions being the detached 90th Cavalry Mortar Detachment at the back of the Americans' line, where the individual units are positioned is a problem. A Company's 2nd Platoon is tucked into the riverbank at C1, and, while severely reduced, they still outnumber what little units I have watching that flank. Not helping this situation is the fact that scattered Polish units garrison the buildings that the Panzer Grenadiers were formerly occupying. At the bridge, of course, almost an entire platoon is still waiting on my side of the bridge, and my forces would have to scramble if they decided to flank the main road. My battered Fusiliers and Jaegers still have plenty of ammo left, but their positioning is just poor, especially with the enemy units scattered around that they'd still have to defend against. Stepping back even further, it is important to look at the broader picture. While I'm not the most knowledgeable about World War II militarily, I'm more of a casual fan. I find it unlikely that any more German forces would be able to reach Chambois before the combined forces garrisoning it either ran out of ammo for their guns, or men to hold said guns. While this is a setback for the Allies and a costly one, the reality is that the German forces in Normandy were pretty much defeated by this point. The only question was, how many men can we get out of the pocket? Now, before I end the video, I do have something to admit that I kept from you guys for the battle. I did play this battle 3 times, although technically I only really played it twice. The first time was when I was trying out the Combat Mission Battle for Normandy demo before I actually bought the game, and I only played about 3 turns of it, so I didn't really see a lot. So then after buying the game, the second time was my first real attempt at the battle, but I made some critical mistakes with my understanding of how combat mission worked that negated my battle plan, and I restarted a little bit before the Cromwells showed up. The third is obviously this attempt. Just as a side note, some of the misunderstandings that I had when it came to how combat mission worked was that I, first of all, believed that I could cut off the bridge access and prevent infantry and other vehicles from crossing it if I just destroyed one vehicle on the bridge, say like an MA Greyhound. That's not how that works, I learned very rudely. It was a big thing for me to plan around. That was pretty much what I was kind of relying on, so then I could divert forces away from the center bridge area to then reinforce the sides and the north. And that didn't work out. I struggled with deciding if I wanted to play another mission and do that one blind for the video when I restarted, but I felt that it would be fine for the purposes of telling a story and a little bit of showing a learning experience. I'm telling you guys about it here at the end because I want to be frank and honest with all of you who are watching, if you are watching. I just don't want to seem like a better player than I am, and to kind of lie about it, you know? Disclosing it here at the end I felt was a acceptable compromise. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. Thank you to everybody in the Combat Mission Discord that helped me out with the historical notes and facts for the script, along with kind of seeing early versions of it so they could tell me what stuff was wrong. I couldn't have done it without you guys. I do have another mission that I did blind that I'd actually like to make a video about eventually, but I won't be able to record that and do it for a while, unfortunately. I'm making my own video game with the help of a few volunteers I found, and that comes first in priority now that I have other people on board to kind of help with me. I don't want to delay them, and they volunteer to help, and I don't want to be the person who's delaying it now, See you guys, and I hope you guys all have a great 2023.